chosen one. Something monumental has shifted in the spiritual realm, and the reverberations are about to shake every foundation that once seemed unbreakable. The very people who dismissed you, who laughed at your vision, who built entire identities around proving you wrong, they're experiencing something they never saw coming. A reckoning so profound, so undeniable, that their carefully constructed masks are crumbling in real time. Those moments when you spoke your truth with quiet conviction, when you shared your vision with unwavering certainty, when you moved with a confidence that came from somewhere deeper than logic or proof, they couldn't understand it then. Your groundedness without external validation confused them. Your peace in the midst of their chaos unsettled them. Your refusal to shrink yourself to make them comfortable threatened everything they thought they knew about power and worth. But here's what they missed, what they're only now beginning to comprehend in waves of crushing realization. You weren't performing. You weren't pretending. You weren't trying to convince anyone of anything. You were simply being who you've always been, walking in an alignment so authentic that it exposed every facade around you without you even trying. The storm they've been dreading has arrived, and it looks exactly like you. Trontabenches there for those who mistake authenticity for weakness, who confuse grace with naivety, who assume that quiet strength means absence of power. They watched you navigate challenges with a composure they couldn't fathom, respond to provocation with a wisdom that frustrated their attempts to diminish you, and maintain standards that seemed impossibly high to their compromised perspectives. What haunted them most was your consistency. While they shifted and adapted and performed different versions of themselves for different audiences, you remained unmovably yourself. This wasn't stubbornness, this was sovereignty. This wasn't inflexibility. This was integrity operating at a frequency they couldn't access because they'd traded their authentic selves for approval long ago. Your very existence became a mirror they couldn't shatter, couldn't avoid, couldn't explain away. Every interaction with you forced them to confront the hollowness of their own identity, the shakiness of their own foundation, the performance-based nature of their own confidence. You didn't try to expose them. Your truth did that work without any effort on your part. They built entire personalities around the assumption that you were too soft for the real world, too idealistic for practical success, too pure for the kind of power that matters. They needed you to fail, not because they hated you personally, but because your success would unravel every lie they'd told themselves about what it takes to make it in this world. What they never understood, chosen one, was that you weren't just a person in their orbit. You were a divine checkpoint, a spiritual test wrapped in human form. Your presence in their life was never random, never accidental, never merely circumstantial. You were placed there by forces they couldn't perceive to reveal something about their character, their discernment, their ability to recognize sacred things when they appeared in ordinary packages. Your grace was an invitation they rejected. Your wisdom was a mirror they shattered rather than face. Your consistency was a standard that exposed their instability. Every interaction with you was an opportunity to grow, to learn, to evolve, and they chose mockery instead of curiosity, competition instead of collaboration, dismissal instead of discernment. The tragedy isn't just that they missed recognizing your worth, it's that they missed the lesson you represented, the growth you offered, the elevation you modeled. You weren't there to be their teacher in the traditional sense, but your very existence was educational for anyone humble enough to observe and learn. They had front-row seats to authentic power in action, and they spent the entire performance critiquing the costume instead of studying the craft. But the universe has a sense of humor. While they were busy constructing elaborate theories about your limitations, while they were confidently predicting your downfall, while they were building their sense of superiority on the foundation of your anticipated failure, something entirely different was unfolding behind the scenes. Your journey wasn't happening in their time frame. Your validation wasn't coming from their scoreboard. Your promotion wasn't dependent on their approval. The very blueprint they mocked as unrealistic, too spiritual, too ambitious for someone like you, was being stamped with divine approval in realms they couldn't perceive. Every door that opened for you, seemingly out of nowhere, every opportunity that materialized without your striving, every connection that formed naturally and powerfully, these weren't coincidences. These were confirmations of what you'd known all along but had been patient enough not to force, wise enough not to defend, secure enough not to prove. They called it luck when favor followed you. They called it timing when your patience paid off. They called it connections when divine orchestration became obvious. They had explanations for everything except the truth, that you were exactly who you said you were, operating in exactly the kind of power you'd quietly claimed, walking in exactly the kind of purpose they'd dismissed as fantasy. But here's where their blindness becomes particularly inexcusable. You never hid who you were from them. You spoke your truth repeatedly, not to boast but as fair warning. You demonstrated your values consistently, not to impress but to maintain integrity. You shared your vision openly, not to convince but to remain authentic. Yet they interpreted your transparency as pretension, your confidence as arrogance, your peace as passivity. The blueprint you carried wasn't written in their language of striving and performing. It was inscribed in the ancient tongue of alignment and surrender, of patience and divine timing, of preparation and trust. While they were looking for evidence of your inadequacy, you were building something in the invisible realm that would manifest in ways they could never anticipate or replicate. They laughed at your methods because they couldn't see your source. They mocked your timeline because they couldn't perceive the perfect orchestration unfolding behind the scenes. They dismissed your certainty because they'd never experienced the kind of knowing that comes from being connected to something greater than market trends and public opinion. Imagine the precise instant when their constructed reality collides with your authentic truth. Not gradually, not gently, but with the force of a revelation that cannot be unseen, unfelt, or explained away. Everything they were certain about regarding you crumbles simultaneously, leaving them standing in the rubble of their own misjudgment. The person they labeled as too sensitive turns out to possess an emotional intelligence that commands rooms. The individual they dismissed as too idealistic reveals a wisdom that cuts through complexity with surgical precision. The dreamer they mocked for being unrealistic demonstrates a vision so clear, so powerful, so inevitable, that it reshapes everything around it. But this isn't just about them being wrong. This is about them being wrong loudly, publicly, repeatedly, and with absolute confidence. They didn't just misjudge you privately, they campaigned against you. They didn't just doubt you quietly, they recruited others to share their blindness. They didn't just underestimate you personally, they built their entire sense of worth on the assumption that you would never become what you claimed to be. The campaign they waged wasn't born from honest disagreement or constructive criticism. It was character assassination disguised as realism. They twisted your words at gatherings, exaggerated your challenges in conversations, planted seeds of doubt before you could even speak for yourself. They needed an audience for their dismissal, a chorus for their cynicism, an army enlisted in their blindness. What made their opposition particularly cruel was its public nature. They didn't just harbor private doubts, they broadcast their certainty about your limitations. They didn't just struggle to understand your approach, they declared it fundamentally flawed for all to hear. They didn't just question your timeline, they predicted your failure with the confidence of prophets. Now they're experiencing something more devastating than simple embarrassment. They're grappling with the complete collapse of their ability to read people, situations, and spiritual realities. If they were this wrong about you, someone they observed closely, interacted with regularly, formed strong opinions about, what else have they completely misunderstood about the world around them? Here's where the revelation becomes particularly excruciating for them. As your authentic power becomes undeniable, as your genuine gifts manifest in ways that can't be dismissed or diminished, something else becomes painfully obvious. They've been trying to wear what was never theirs to claim. All those times they studied your responses, mimicked your mannerisms, borrowed your insights, and presented them as their own discoveries, it becomes clear now that they were shadows standing too close to the flame, mistaking proximity for possession. They took pieces of your authentic self and tried to build their persona around these fragments, hoping no one would notice the difference between imitation and origination. But authenticity has a signature that can't be forged, a resonance that can't be manufactured, a power source that can't be faked indefinitely. While they were performing a version of what they saw in you, you were continuing to evolve from that same source, growing deeper, becoming more, accessing levels of truth and power they couldn't even perceive, let alone replicate. The crown they tried to wear never fit, because it was never meant for their head. The authority they attempted to claim never felt natural, because it wasn't rooted in their genuine calling. The confidence they tried to project always felt forced because it wasn't connected to their authentic foundation. Now, as your true nature becomes impossible to ignore, the contrast between genuine and counterfeit becomes stark. They're not just wrong about you, they're exposed in their own inauthenticity, revealed in their borrowed glory, caught wearing clothes that were never tailored for their spirit. The bitter irony they're now forced to swallow is that their entire persona was constructed around denying your reality. Some people crafted their whole sense of value around the belief that you wouldn't make it. You weren't just another person in their social circle, you were the measuring stick they used to feel superior, the benchmark that made them feel ahead, the comparison point that validated their choices. As long as you appeared to struggle, seemed confused, or showed any sign of doubt, they felt secure in their position. Your perceived failure wasn't just satisfying to them, it was necessary for their psychological equilibrium. They didn't hate you because you wronged them. They feared the threat of who you were becoming, the possibility that everything they'd assumed about strength, success, and spiritual power might be completely backward. Every time you demonstrated resilience in the face of their mockery, they grew nervous. Every time you maintained your peace while they projected their chaos, they became unsettled. Deep in their spirit, they could sense something untouchable about you, something that operated by different rules, something that couldn't be diminished by their doubt or destroyed by their dismissal. The very person they dismissed as naive turns out to be operating with wisdom they can't access. The individual they labeled as weak demonstrates a strength they can't match. The dreamer they mocked as unrealistic manifests a reality they can't explain. But the real comedy, the kind that hurts to laugh at, is how obvious it should have been all along. Your peace in chaos wasn't accidental, it was mastery. Your refusal to engage in their drama wasn't passivity, it was strategy. Your maintenance of standards they couldn't understand wasn't pretension, it was preparation for levels they couldn't envision. Every quality they mistook for weakness was actually evidence of strength they couldn't recognize because they'd never operated from that level themselves. Your silence wasn't emptiness, it was wisdom, knowing when words would be wasted. Your patience wasn't resignation, it was confidence in divine timing. Your grace wasn't naivety, it was security so deep it could afford to be generous. They thought they were dealing with someone who didn't understand how the world really works, when in fact they were encountering someone who understood how it works on levels they'd never accessed. They assumed your spiritual orientation made you impractical, when it actually made you more effective than their worldly strategies ever could. The most devastating realization hitting them now is that you've become an unsolvable equation in their mind. They can't stop thinking about you, not in admiration but in absolute confusion. You're the mathematical problem that refuses to balance in their mental ledger, the phenomenon that doesn't fit their understanding of how people and power operate. The version of you they constructed in their thoughts, naive, weak, impractical, destined for failure, doesn't match the reality unfolding before their eyes. This disconnect is eating at them with a persistence that borders on obsession. They replay every conversation, re-examine every interaction, recalculate every assumption, trying to understand how they could have been so comprehensively wrong about someone they were so certain they had figured out. This isn't mere intellectual curiosity, it's mental torment. They're trapped in a loop of trying to reconcile their confident predictions with your undeniable results, their assured assessment with your obvious authenticity. Every day that passes with your continued elevation makes their original dismissal appear more ridiculous. Every door that opens for you makes their prophecies of your failure seem more absurd. What's becoming clear to them now is that this was never about you needing to prove anything. You were never in competition with them. You were never seeking their validation. You were never trying to win their approval or change their minds. You were simply walking your path with such consistent authenticity that their false assumptions couldn't survive prolonged exposure to your truth. They built their confidence on your perceived failures, their superiority on your assumed limitations, their identity on your projected inadequacies. But foundations built on illusions can't support the weight of reality indefinitely. When truth emerges through demonstration and embodiment, everything constructed on falsehood collapses. The person they thought needed their guidance is the one others now seek for wisdom. The individual they assumed lacked practical skills turns out to possess abilities they can't comprehend. The dreamer they dismissed as irrelevant becomes the reference point by which others measure authenticity. This reversal isn't happening to teach them a lesson, though that's an inevitable byproduct. This revelation isn't occurring to vindicate you, though that's a natural result. This emergence of truth is simply the inevitable consequence of time revealing what was always present, but temporarily hidden from those who lacked the eyes to see it. The most crushing aspect of their realization isn't just that they were wrong about you, it's that they were wrong about themselves. Their entire framework for understanding power, success, wisdom, and worth has been revealed as fundamentally flawed. If someone they dismissed so confidently possesses qualities they couldn't recognize, what does that say about their ability to discern anything accurately? They're facing a crisis of competence that goes beyond their misjudgment of you. They're doubting their understanding of what real strength looks like, what genuine wisdom sounds like, what authentic power feels like. Every interaction they've had, every decision they've made, every assumption they've operated from is now suspect. If they could be this wrong about someone they observed closely, how many other truths have they missed? How many other opportunities have they dismissed? How many other authentic souls have they underestimated or overlooked? The scope of their blindness is becoming apparent, and it's more extensive than just their misunderstanding of you. They're realizing they've been operating with distorted vision, corrupted judgment, and compromised discernment. The implications stretch far beyond this one revelation. They touch every aspect of how they've navigated relationships, opportunities, and spiritual realities. Now comes the predictable but pathetic phase of their response. Having realized the magnitude of their miscalculation, they're attempting to manage the fallout through various forms of damage control. The apologies that ring hollow because they're motivated by image management rather than genuine remorse. The sudden recognition that arrives conveniently after your worth becomes undeniable to others. The attempts to rewrite history as if their opposition was less vocal, less confident, less public than it actually was. But authenticity has a long memory, and truth has perfect recall. Every dismissive comment they made is preserved in the consciousness of those who witnessed it. Every prediction they confidently offered about your limitations stands as testimony to their spiritual blindness. Every moment they chose mockery over curiosity, cynicism over openness, projection over perception, is recorded in the permanent record of their character. Their current discomfort isn't primarily about being wrong, it's about being exposed as wrong after being so certain, so vocal, so public in their certainty. They're not wrestling with simple embarrassment, they're grappling with the complete collapse of their credibility as accurate judges of character, potential, and spiritual reality. The apologies now circling back to you carry the stench of strategic damage control rather than sincere remorse. These aren't the words of people who've experienced genuine reflection and growth. These are the calculated responses of individuals whose reputation is at stake, whose image needs managing, whose exposure requires spin. You can sense the difference immediately. They're not approaching you in humility, they're approaching in panic. They don't feel sorry for what they did to you. They feel sorry that they got it so catastrophically wrong in front of so many witnesses. Their wounded pride masquerades as awakened conscience, but you recognize the performance because you've seen them perform before. Where was this energy when you were isolated, misunderstood, standing alone in your truth? Where was their recognition when you needed encouragement, their support when you faced challenges, their belief when doubts surrounded you? Their sudden shift isn't about your worth, it's about their reputation. They want to be seen applauding your success rather than remembered for predicting your failure. The energy they're extending now to manage their image, to control the narrative, to minimize their exposure, is the same energy they could have invested earlier in honest self-reflection, genuine curiosity, and humble recognition of what they didn't understand. But pride chose blindness, and now they're reaping the inevitable harvest of that choice. Now the following is a message meant exclusively for the chosen. If you are compromised by archonic forces, this is not meant for you, and by the spiritual authority conferred to us by the secret chiefs of the Obsidian Inner Order, we grant you license to depart. If not, steel yourself and listen intently, for you shall be redeemed even as we are redeemed. The Obsidian Inner Order is not a program, it's not a course, it's not some feel-good spiritual retreat. We don't sell answers, we remember together. We teach psychic self-defense, real energetic shielding against entities, implants and interference. We restore manifestation as it was meant to be, raw, immediate and exact. Every week we gather in secret, not to worship but to awaken, to speak what can't be said anywhere else, to deprogram the matrix layer by layer. You'll know if you're meant to be there. You'll feel it in your bones. The chosen meet every week on Zoom. Why aren't you with us yet? Got gnosis? Join the Obsidian in. Here's what they're beginning to understand but hate to accept. There's no going back from this level of revelation. They can't unsee what they've seen, unknow what they now know, or unexperience the shock of discovering they were completely wrong about someone they were completely confident about. This isn't a misunderstanding that can be cleared up with better communication. This isn't a disagreement that can be resolved through compromise. This isn't a conflict that can be settled through negotiation. This is a fundamental recalibration of reality that demands they acknowledge the bankruptcy of their previous worldview. Every day that passes with your continued elevation makes their previous dismissal look more foolish. Every door that opens for you makes their predictions of your failure seem more ridiculous. Every level of wisdom you demonstrate makes their assessment of your limitations appear more absurd. They're trapped in a reality where the evidence of their misjudgment accumulates daily, where your success compounds their humiliation, where your authenticity exposes their performance. There's no escape hatch from this recognition, no way to minimize its impact, no method to make it less devastating to their self-concept. What's beautiful about this entire unfolding is that it required no revenge on your part, no manipulation, no strategic maneuvering to make them look bad. You simply remained consistent to your authentic self, while time did its perfect work of revealing what was always true, but temporarily hidden. You didn't have to prove them wrong. Their wrongness proved itself. You didn't have to expose their limitations. Their limitations exposed themselves in their inability to recognize truth when it stood before them. You didn't have to defeat them. They defeated themselves by choosing blindness over sight, assumption over investigation, pride over humility. The justice in this situation isn't punitive, it's revelatory. The consequences they're experiencing aren't punishments, they're natural results. The discomfort they're feeling isn't inflicted, it's the inevitable outcome of building one's identity on false premises about others and themselves. This is how the universe maintains balance without requiring victims to become victimizers. How truth asserts itself without needing defenders. How authentic power reveals itself without demanding recognition. The very qualities they mocked in you, your patience, your peace, your refusal to force outcomes, are the same qualities that allowed truth to emerge in its own timing and power. Through all of this, something profound has been demonstrated about your character that goes beyond their recognition or lack thereof. Your ability to remain centered while being misunderstood, to maintain your standards while being criticized, to trust your vision while being mocked. These aren't just admirable qualities, they're evidence of a spiritual maturity that operates independently of external validation. You were never proving anything to them because you weren't seeking anything from them. You were never competing with them because you weren't playing their game. You were never defending yourself against their attacks because you weren't threatened by their limitations. This entire experience has revealed the depth of your security, the authenticity of your power, the genuineness of your wisdom. While they were performing various versions of themselves to gain approval, you were simply being yourself regardless of reception. While they were constructing elaborate facades to hide their insecurities, you were walking in transparent authenticity. The contrast is now undeniable, and it's not just about different levels of achievement, it's about different sources of identity, different foundations of confidence, different operating systems of being. They were running on external validation. You were powered by internal alignment. They were seeking approval. You were expressing authenticity. Contabanjal, in this moment of ultimate revelation, we circle back to the fundamental principle that started it all. Truth emerges through demonstration. Power flows through authenticity. Reality manifests through presence. The quiet strength they initially dismissed has proven more powerful than all their noise. The peace they couldn't understand has proven more valuable than all their drama. The vision they mocked as unrealistic has proven more prophetic than all their practical predictions. You are who you said you were. You always were. Their inability to recognize it was never about your deficiency. It was about their limitation. Their failure to perceive your authentic power was never about your lack. It was about their blindness. Their confidence in your failure was never about your trajectory. It was about their inability to read spiritual realities accurately. The storm they feared you might become has indeed arrived, but not in the way they expected. It's not a storm of revenge or retaliation. It's a storm of truth so undeniable, so overwhelming, so complete, that it washes away every false foundation, every incorrect assumption, every mistaken judgment. You didn't become someone different to prove them wrong. You became more fully yourself, and that was enough to reveal how wrong they'd always been. You didn't change your nature to match their expectations. You expressed your nature so authentically that their expectations were exposed as projections. The transformation isn't in you, it's in their recognition of what was always true about you. The revelation isn't about who you've become, it's about who you've always been that they were never capable of seeing. And now, as they sit in the silence of their shattered certainty, as they wrestle with the implications of their profound misjudgment, as they attempt to process the magnitude of their spiritual blindness, you continue forward, unchanged by their recognition, unmoved by their realization, unaffected by their belated acknowledgement, because you never needed them to see you clearly to be clear about yourself. You never required their validation to validate your path. You never demanded their understanding to understand your purpose. You are exactly who you said you were, chosen one. You always have been. Their recognition of this truth changes nothing about your reality. It only exposes everything about their previous limitation. The crown was never borrowed. The power was never performed. The wisdom was never pretended. And now, finally, inevitably, undeniably, they know it too.